This coronavirus is bigger than anything we've ever seen before. And on the biggest picture of all, the coronavirus and the coming crash, financial collapse possibly, marks the end of the industrial age and the beginning of the information age. It's a very big move. And the people that are in trouble today are people still stuck in industrial age thoughts. The people that are struggling financially haven't moved on yet. Those of you at home right now who are sitting going, but I'm going to lose my job, my house, my pension, and all this, it's because you're trapped with old thoughts. And as most people know, is that, when I came up with Rich Dad, Poor Dad with 20-something years ago, mainstream media crucified me. They said, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, you don't know what you're talking about. I said, the rich don't work for money. Savers are losers. Your house is not an asset. And I was crucified, just crucified. And the good news is the most important thing you can have right now is not job security, but meaningful work. So you and I don't need the money, but our work is meaningful. And it's our meaningful work that gets us through the hard times. So the good news is my company is sold out. We cannot keep up with product. The bad news is the supply chain shut down, but that's a good problem. We have tons of cash. I have gold, I have silver. And I do have challenges in the real estate market, but that's going to make me stronger. That's my only attitude I can have. Otherwise, I just cry and say, well, the government should take care of me. I need a bailout. I need a stimulus. And stimulus means welfare for the rich. When I talk to young people, which drives the school teachers, I don't go back to schools anymore because I'm not politically correct. You know what I mean? So I went back, so when I would explain the Fed to them, I said, well, just think of this big illusion. And that's Ben Bernanke, Janet Yellen, and this guy Powell. And before that was that other character, I forget his name already. But everybody thinks they're wizards, but they're controlled by grunge, gross universal cashless. Our wealth is stolen via the money we work for. We need financial education because the real problem of this crisis started back in 1904 when the richest guys on earth took over the education system in the United States. They formed a thing called the General Education Board. It was formed by guys like Rockefeller and J.P. Morgan. And what they pulled out of education was financial education. And that's why I wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It was a warning shot across the bow back in 1997. I said, wake up, something's coming down the road. So we're here right now. This is the biggest transformation in the history of the world. It's from industrial age to information age. I'm doing well because I made the transition. I'm making more money than ever before. I have problems, but I'm making more money than ever before. But if you're losing money right now, the problem starts in what you were taught in school. Because they never taught you anything about money. They never taught you about a financial statement, like my rich dad did. They teach you that diploma is everything. It's a piece of toilet paper. BS.
I'm concerned, if what I think is about to happen is going to happen, which is the demise of the U.S. dollar, the hegemony of it, and its power and its reserve status.
This is really about the power of exponential growth. And a lot of the trends that are sort of driving the world we live in at large are exponential. And the human mind doesn't do a really good job of understanding exponentials. And that's why I came up with this analogy about the magic eyedropper in the stadium. Basically, he says, look, pick the stadium of your choice. Imagine somebody takes a magic eyedropper and walks down to the pitcher's mound and squeezes out a single drop of water right there on the pitcher's mound. And that drop of water doubles in volume every minute. So minute 1, it's 1 drop in size. Minute 2, it's 2 drops in size. Minute 3, it's 4 drops in size. Minute 4, it's 8 drops in size, right? So the question is if you got handcuffed to the topmost bleacher seat in the stadium, how long would you have to escape your handcuffs before the stadium was underwater? Most people will say, I don't know, year, months. The answer is very surprising. The answer is 45 minutes. Much less time than you think. And that's just because when it doubles, each doubling is bigger than all the increases that came before it. But the really important question is what time does that happen? And that happens at minute 40. By the time you see there's a problem, the stadium's filled just a couple of minutes later, right? By the time you see the issue, it's way too late to avoid it. your only choices at this point in time are just to sort of manage the impact. The functioning of our financial system, are you talking about the US dollar as a reserve currency, or are you talking about just our ability to afford our basic way of living? I mean, that right now, I think, is getting pretty late in the game, especially if you live in parts of the world that are really suffering right now under just crushing inflation. I mean, I don't think anybody in Europe, for example, could have ever forecasted a year ago that they would be paying what they're paying right now for energy.
Yeah.
So when you look at, a lot of times in America can't see because we're a goldfish bowl. Everybody looks in, but we don't see out. I'm looking at what happened in Sri Lanka, what's happening in Brazil, what's happening in England, what's going to happen in Germany. We can't see it as Americans.
I think the goldfish bowl is a great analogy too, because goldfish really have like incredibly short-term memories.
I'm sitting here watching all this, so that's why I keep thinking the eye drop theory. I said, when Pitcher's Mound is covered and I'm sitting in the top bleacher, how much time have I got?
You're right to be looking outside because collapse happens from the outside in, right? It's the weaker players that fall first. And then those are dominoes that topple over bigger dominoes. And then it all begins to progress toward the center. And yes, we live here in our fishbowl, our goldfish bowl here in the US. We do have a lot of advantages that a lot of other countries don't have. We're likely not going to be the first one to fall. We're probably likely going to be the last one. But to find out where we are in the story, we want to look out at the periphery and see how it's doing. And as you just said, Robert, the very extreme ends of the periphery are not doing well at all.
Adversity makes you smarter. Adversity makes you a better leader. It's probably the most important thing because we're going into some very, very adverse times. I do this because it's proof I said it, if you know what I mean. Because everybody now is a prophet. The biggest stock market crash in history is still coming. And I'm going to change the title to, it's here. This is the biggest crash we'll ever see in our lifetimes. It's called the everything bubble. Everything's going to come down. And then it's how you can prepare for it. So for most people, that's bad news. But as I was saying last night, crashes, everything goes on sale. And you can't get rich at that time. Like right now I'm in hog's heaven because Saks is always having sales. I'm in there shopping. But the most important thing this country and the world needs, as you know, Europe's in trouble. They don't think the EU is going to make it. China's in trouble. Japan's in serious trouble. The world's in trouble. It's in trouble because of lack of leadership. And as President John Kennedy said, leadership and learning go hand in hand, basically. I'm here to serve those who serve. We need more leaders, ladies and gentlemen. But this country sorely lacks leaders. I'm not Republican or Democrat, but I just can't believe what's going on in our government. I mean, how can they open the borders? How can they cut off the Keystone XL pipeline? How can this guy blame Russia, President blame Ukraine and Russia for our problems? We have food shortages. Sri Lanka, which is the richest island nations in the world, is in rioting right now. So we need leaders. This is a time for you to become bigger leaders because I think people are kind of waking up that maybe it's our leadership that's the problem. There's a guy named Jordan Peterson who said, if you think tough men are bad, just see the damage a weak leader can do. We've had weak leaders all over the world right now.
So how bad do you think market crash is going to be? How bad, how ugly can it get?
The worst case, which I hope I'm wrong, be civil war inside America. That's more than a crash, it's a civil war. So the worst it could get is civil war. I think the best we can expect is probably a depression. We're already going into it. As I said last night, you know what we do, we print money to solve our problems. And all that does is increase debt and creates more freeloaders, social welfare. I'm not against social welfare, but don't print money to pay for it. At the same time, our debt escalates. Our debt to GDP right now is 120%. At 90% debt to GDP, we're bankrupt. That means for every dollar we spend, we go deeper in debt right now. So our debt is now in the trillions. I don't know how many trillions it really, I've heard it's 260 trillion. I don't know how they measure it anymore. At the same time, they raise interest rates into a recession. This has never been done before. So that's why I'm saying that somebody intentionally doing something to bring America down and the world down. And there's a video of Trump speaking to, I think, the United Nations or something, and he's telling the German contingency back in 2018, he says, don't trust the Russians. Don't depend upon the Russians. And now Russia can cut off their power.
I knew this time was coming. And we as a world have never been here before. And so is it a spooky time? Damn yeah. is probably the most dangerous time ever, 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 ever. There's nothing to compare it to because there's never been a world economy before. For example, 100 years ago, if there was a stock market crash in England, it didn't affect anybody. Now the US goes down, the world goes down. So plus with social media and all this we're doing now, and so we've never been here before. And, I'm excited about it because I make more money in crashes than I do when they go up. So, but for the average person, they'll get wiped out. I'm afraid at the worst, I hope I'm wrong, but I think we're heading for a global depression.
Global depression?
Yeah.
What does that look like?
Depression. I mean, people are depressed. The economy stays down. It's hard to come back up. And now the good news is that for those who are prepared for it, like you and things like this, you'll do better. See, not everybody dies in a plane crash. Some plane crashes. But the last crash in 2008, I was on Wolf Blitzer's program 6 months before Lehman Brothers went down. And I said Lehman was going down. And nobody listened, but it went down. And so I've been expecting this market to go down for quite a while. And I'm concerned about my fellow human beings. But as you know, most Americans are clueless. They don't know what's going on. But, if you travel the world, I just got back from Africa and China and Japan and New Zealand. People are scared. Australia, which hasn't had a recession in 30 years, is in recession. But Americans are fat, dumb, and happy, having a good time, which is good. But I'm concerned. That's all I can say. I'd be afraid if I had kids. I think as an adult, you can go hungry, but you don't want to see your kids go hungry. And that's what's going to happen.
You think it's going to get that bad?
Yeah. And the US dollar is fake. Never in the history of the world has any fake money ever survived. And we're doing the same thing. We just keep printing this money. And when I wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad almost 25 years ago, people said I didn't know what I was talking about. I said savers would be losers. Now, today, there's quantitative easing, which is counterfeiting money. And then you have zero interest rates. And people are still saving money. Are you nuts? They just printed, I think, $500 billion in September of this year because the repo market is going down. And the average guy goes, well, what's the repo market? They don't know. So that's why it's fake money, fake teachers, fake assets. Our education system, it has been my rant forever. Why don't we teach people about money? Why is it? We all use money, but we don't teach people about it. So that's why I'm concerned. And